Nope. Good to go. Ready? Hello. Hello. Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Justin, and this is the first Toledo Codes Meetup. The goal of Toledo Codes is to sort of revive tech meetups in Toledo post-COVID. I'm from Toledo, but I've lived in the Bay Area and in Austin and worked in tech for the last 20 years. And I used to go to 2 to 3 of these a week. And so the goal is to, this is the starting point, right? Like this is the diving board, the launching off point, right? So I'd love to see more of you. If you all have any talks in mind or anything you want to share with the community, we can talk afterwards. But yeah, thank you again for coming out. The agenda for today is pretty straightforward. We did a little bit of pizza and networking. We'll do a quick 10 to 15 minute post-mortem of Rocket Hacks, which was a hackathon that the UT students threw on. Some of them are in the audience today. And then I'll do about a 30 to 45 minute talk about what I call augmented development. We won't deep dive too much into code today. In fact, I won't demo any code today. It's more of a theoretical framework. But I'm happy to have this discussion afterwards with you. I'm happy to demo afterwards with you. And this in the future could easily be a workshop. So with that, I will introduce Nikhil.
Check.
Can you guys hear me in the back? Perfect. I don't need a mic then. Well, good evening, guys. As Justin said, my name is Nikhil. I'm a sophomore majoring in computer science and engineering at the University of Toledo. It's good to see so many tech enthusiasts in one room. Yeah, it's just so awesome. Well, I'm not going to waste your time, and I'm going to go directly into it. I'm here to talk about the talk of the town. A game changer for students and developers of Toledo. Rocket Hacks 2025. A big round of applause to our leadership team and our organizing team right on the Well, before I get into it, let me just revert back to the summer of 2024 when Caleb, our director, the one who's eating the pizza right there, and Vedant, our tech lead, and I went to UC Berkeley to attend their hackathon. And with that experience, we thought, what can we do to bring this energy to Toledo? Well, imagine going all the way across the country to attend a hackathon, So it was just a thought in the beginning, but Caleb here ran with it, and after 5 months of sheer dedication by a team mostly of sophomores who have never done an event at such a big scale, we built Rocket Hacks from the scratch. With limited resources, we went all in. Just to give you an idea about how much we did for the event, well, the people who were at the event, you might have seen the banners for Rocket Hacks. Those banners were handmade. Each and every letter was cut out of paper and then put on a background. The Rocky drawing that you saw on the whiteboard was done by Adi, our co-director, with a marker. And a couple of our organizing team members, they cut out Rocky, our mascot again, out of paper. Every effort that we put into making Rocket Hacks better was done with the belief that we are doing something that will be impactful. Now, why does all of this matter anyway? Well, I believe hackathons aren't just about coding. They are playgrounds for innovation. At hackathons, you're forced to develop something that will, solve a real world problem. With people you don't know, with people from different backgrounds, and push you to a level even you didn't think was possible. So that's the power of hackathons. I have seen at Rocket Hacks, I saw people come in, not so confident of their skill sets, and leave with a whole new level of confidence. I've seen people come into Rocket Hacks with no ideas about projects, and then learn skill sets they didn't even know they could learn. So that's the power of hackathons again. I'm kind of forgetting my speech right here because there's so many people, but yeah. I'm sorry, guys.
You're good, man. Take your time.
Yeah. Again, so yeah, for some students, Rocket Hacks, as I said, was their first experience at building something tangible. But this isn't just about one event. This is about the bigger picture. How do we build Toledo into a true tech hub? Tech hubs are built by people who are ready to take risks, who are ready to share knowledge, and who are ready to push boundaries. That's where events like Rocket Hacks and Toledo Codes come in. We are not just organizing events, but we are building a movement. We are building a culture that says Toledo is not just a manufacturing city, but it is also a tech city. So what's next? Rocket Hacks 2026, which will happen at a bigger scale, which will be better, bolder, and bigger. We aim to get more participants, more sponsors, bigger prizes, and better industrial connections. We want companies to see what's happening in Toledo and invest in it. And we cannot get this done alone. So that's where events like these meetups come in. These meetups help us make connections that drive tech communities forward. Every tech city has a grassroots movement, and this right here is ours. So I have a challenge for you guys. Get involved. How? Join hackathons. Attend meetups. If you're a student, again, build, participate, and just create something unique. If you're a professional like Justin here, you can mentor. You can sponsor hackathons. You can sponsor all the local events. Or if you can't sponsor, you can at least get the connections that would get the sponsorships. Rocket Hacks was just the start. Toledo Codes is another step like that. And together, we are not just having an event, but we're creating a movement that will take Toledo to the tech scene. So let's get to it, guys. Thank you so much. You have a great rest of the evening.
Yeah, thank you, Nikhil. Really, really excited about some of the momentum I've seen here in Toledo in the tech scene. And with that, I'll jump right into my talk. The talk is Augmented Development. And I'm really introducing a way of reasoning about how to work with an LLM or AI as you're developing. There are a few use cases for it, right? Whether that's greenfield, whether you're starting a project from new, you're debugging, you're looking, or you're just trying to reason through a code base. These are all really great use cases, except some of them fell short, in particular with debugging, right? Even greenfield coding, AI doesn't do too hot in. But I'll start with a mythology, I will say, of what's called the 10x developer. This is a mythos around the idea of a 10x developer. They exist, supposedly. They usually show up in a hoodie, unshaven, coding through the night while consuming nothing but pizza and energy drinks. Legend goes that they single-handedly produce code that would take an average programmer, would take 10 average programmers to create. But what does research actually tell us about productivity variance? Recent studies paint a more nuanced picture. While productivity differences between developers certainly exist, the 10x multiplier often stems from systems knowledge, right? So these developers are familiar with the code bases they're working in. Collaborative amplification. So the most effective developers elevate their entire team, not just are sitting in an isolate room writing code. Problem definition. Elite developers excel at defining problems before solving them. These 10x developers are also masters of their tools, right? They're proficient with development environments, debugging tools, and automation. And lastly, they're familiar with technical debt, right? They understand the implication of the balance between speed, speed and productivity, or I should say, they understand the nuance between the balance with speed and maintainability, preventing future slowdowns. And perhaps the real 10x effect comes not from hiring mythical coding superheroes, but from building systems and cultures in your organization that amplify everyone's capabilities. So yeah, with this, we have the new productivity equation. So this number here, developers using AI can be up to 55% faster. What this means is that they're 55% more productive. But of course, this is with a caveat, right? Errors can slip in, and they do happen. If any of you here have worked with an LLM as you're programming, you've seen it. I know I have. And these AI tools are really becoming the new 10x multiplier. If your organization isn't developing processes and tooling around these, you're going to be left behind. But this technology really isn't enough because it requires human oversight and collaboration. In a study by Bilkent University in 2023, 2 years ago, research evaluated code outputs from various AI assistants and found about 30% of those AI-generated solutions were incorrect, and about 50% of them were only partially correct. That's a problem. In Stack Overflow's 2024 Pulse survey, 38% of developers said the code that the assistant produced was inaccurate or incorrect at least half the time. Those are staggering figures. It means this, it almost sounds like these things aren't as useful as everyone is purporting they are. But I say these things not to demonstrate two things. One, AI isn't going to replace programmers just yet, or meet the 90% rate that Dario Amodi, the CEO of Anthropic, said. And though I encourage the use of AI in software development, it's not without its risks. Because, well, even with those risks, what used to take a developer 1 hour can take them now 27 minutes. It's a huge productivity gain. But like I said, it's a balance. Because you have to be the one in control. You can't just let it cook. You have to be the chef de cuisine, right? You have to be the head chef. I probably watched too many Gordon Ramsay shows, but and so with that, over the last couple of years, I've been working with Copilot since 2021, Tab 9 a little bit before that. I think Tab 9 used GPT-2 or something like that. Really, really useful tools. And so over the last, I would say, 6 months, I've been ideating on a way of working with these tools. And the way that I kind of came up with this is through this acronym, which I call DIRECT, which is design, ideate, review, enhance, compose, and test. The goal here is to help developers harness AI speed while retaining full control over quality and security, right? These are also things we have to consider. And so a question, and I'll take a couple questions from the audience, but I really want to I want you guys to think about this. What specific coding challenge do you wish AI could solve for you, but it currently falls short? Take anyone. Go ahead.
Writing the code.
Okay, anyone else?
I was just playing around with one last night. It's not very good at regular expressions. Appropriate regular.
Interesting, yeah. I would think it would be good at that.
You would think so.
Yeah.
But what I ended up doing was giving it, I kind of kept working with it, said, hey, now get it to work with this, right? Give it some sample data. So I found you can iterate and get a good answer, but right off the bat, it's not going to give you good.
Yeah, and that's a part of what really gets into this idea here. And I don't know if everyone can read this. I tried to make a little infographic here, but really this is a quick history lesson. I'll be maybe 5 minutes on this. This is the evolution of coding assistants. So from the 1940s to the 1980s, programmers went from manually punching holes in cards to these days we have OpenAI Codex generate entire functions, right? Radical transformation, huge transformation. In 99, Kent Beck formalized what we call pair programming around core practice of what he called extreme programming, where one developer codes as the driver and while another navigates as reviews as the navigator. And I'm sure this is a practice almost anyone who's worked professionally in software has done, right? Pair coding is very useful, in particular when you're stuck, right? Sometimes we call that rubber ducking, right? Where you'll just sit there and spew out your problem, and eventually you'll figure it out on your own. In '96, Microsoft introduced IntelliSense into Visual Basic 5. Revolutionary, right? The first mainstream tool that could automatically suggest code completions. In 2019, Jacob Jackson, Tab 9, which I briefly mentioned, applied OpenAI's GPT-2 transformer to create insanely accurate predictions that developers found almost uncanny. And then in 2021, of course, we're all familiar with GitHub Copilot, launched through a collaboration between GitHub and OpenAI. And this is the sort of first widespread AI pair programmer. Now in 2023, Google reports that more than 25% of new code at the company was being automatically generated with AI assistance. That's a huge signal, right? A huge shift from one of the tech giants. And then in 2022, November of 2022, OpenAI introduced ChatGPT. And so these are getting a little bit into the eras where I've kind of ideated that, you know, we have the sort of manual era, the collaborative era, the AI assisted era, and now we're in what I'm calling the AI native era. And, you know, in 2022, now we have natural language debugging and code generation. And then also in 2022, Michael Truol and Aman Sanger founded Cursor, which was the first, like one of the first AI first IDEs. And so, you know, I'm curious, out of everyone here, this is just a huge shift in timelines, right? Like in the last 5 years, it has really been a really exciting time. And I know some of us are, I know I personally am, you know, a bit hesitant on some of the news cycle around this, right? There's a lot of hype around this. I said metrics that Anthropic CEO said 90% of code will be written by AI. I think those of us who are in the weeds and doing this stuff know that that's not true, or at least in some part it's not true. I could be wrong though, who knows? And I'm curious, in the last month, can I get a hand, like somebody to raise their hands here if you've used an AI tool in the last month to write code? Yeah, so a good majority of us.
Hey Justin, I'm curious how many people here use punch cards. Because I have in college.
Okay, that's a fair question. One that I couldn't raise my hand to. It's a little before my time. Though I think almost a little bit before your guys' time too.
That's where you were.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, so with this, I'm not going to break down the direct acronym at this point, right? So what is the goal here, right? So the design phase is more about using the AI as your PM, right? At this point, as you're iterating through whatever you're working on, you really want to give it as much context. If you're working in a ticketing system like Jira or Linear, you know, grab the ticket and give it some context, right? Iterate with it. And I prefer a reasoning model in this phase. So that's something like 0103, DeepSeek, something like that with what they call thinking, right? And I use quotes right there on purpose. We start with your high-level business goal. You let AI generate the initial architecture or whatever it is that you're doing there. And this is an important part that I found that really works well is prompting to incorporate TDD, right? Once I've defined, in particular from writing new code, and TDD, for those who don't know, is test-driven development. And what that means is we write our tests first before we write the code, and then as we write the code, we let the tests will pass. With the goal being that our code will then align with the business goals that we've set out to accomplish. And so I found that by incorporating TDD principles within the AI draft, in this initial drafting phase, that it tends to deliver better code. This is the part you really want to scrutinize, right? And you're going to review and refine this through a conversation, just as you would a junior or a PM with your PM or with a junior engineer. And the result is a requirements first, test-driven specification in minutes. And the AI excels at this. The next phase of this is the ideate. And in this, we're exploring multiple solutions, right? You've got your requirements. We're asking a couple different implementation strategies. I find typically that it tends to give me a very overcomplicated implementation strategy. This is where you really need to scrutinize almost at every step here, right? You need to read and evaluate yourself. This is not a moment to quote YOLO, right? Like don't just let we're not vibe coding here, right? You are developers, and so you have to scrutinize the code. You have to scrutinize the plan, right? Which means sometimes you might, if you don't understand it, you might need to go to a more senior engineer to get confirmation, right? So in this phase, we're gonna have it. You can ideate with it to have it explain sort of trade-offs between different approaches, right? There's almost always trade-offs between various approaches, whether that's performance, maintainability, complexity, and these are all trade-offs that you have to keep in mind as you're introducing this code into your code base. And you can use the AI to help you combine the best aspects of those different solutions. And effectively what you're doing is you're turning I need X into what are different ways to implement X. And this is probably the most important phase of this. You as the developer need to be the quality gate. It stops with you. AI code often contains really subtle logic errors while looking syntactically correct. And that's very difficult, in particular with junior engineers. And we'll talk about that a bit later. You need to review this for security vulnerabilities. AI can implement outdated patterns. You need to check for edge cases and error handling. It typically optimizes for the happy path. And you need to verify your business logic alignment. Does the code actually solve the right problem? And this is where TDD helps, right? Like it helps validate this, right? If you're writing your tests and you're scrutinizing those tests and you're running them as you're iterating, you're almost guaranteed to at least have some solution that solves your business problem, whether you're adding security problems or not. Security issues or tech debt is another question. So I went through D, I, R, now onto the E, enhance. This is iterative refinement. So we're starting with a working implementation, and then we request targeted improvements, right? AI doesn't typically work well when you just give it a large problem and you just have it cycle between the problem. In Cursor, for example, you can have Cursor execute your Python code and just have it evaluate the error, and it's literally called YOLO mode, where it just executes system commands on your computer, unbeknownst to you, whatever it's doing, and it can evaluate it. And I have seen this, I've experimented with it, and the results are not compelling, right? And I'm sure some of you have encountered the same thing. I'm sure some of you have tried this. And so you start with a working implementation, then request targeted improvements. For example, you could say like, optimize this query for performance instead of like rewriting it from scratch. And some of this gets into context as well. IDEs like Cursor, for example, really help providing that context if you're working in that environment. And you use AI to refactor towards the design patterns and best practices. And I mention this later, but for example, myself, whenever I work with an AI, I'm always telling it TDD, solid, the solid principles, follow those, and pretty unequivocally, as I've worked with, as I've done some prompt engineering, by giving it just those few principles alone, it really helps code quality output tremendously, especially if you have example code that you can give it that you've written, which is probably my favorite way of doing that. The next part of it is, so we've got the D, I, R, E. We're on to the C. This is compose, which is the cohesive integration phase. So standardized naming across generative modules. We're going to verify consistent error handling and logging. I'm a big fan of logging, trace logging at function entry and exit. This makes it easy for debugging later on. We establish shared utilities instead of duplicated helper functions. I'm sure some of you have seen this, where I give the AI something, I give it all this context, and I say, I've got all this, I've got a logger written right here, and the AI just spits out a new one for you in a whole different place. This is a bit of that where you really have to go back and forth with it, and sometimes even just revert. I use commits pretty often if I am working with AI, or if you're working on Cursor, they have checkpoints that you can use to sort of take a step back and stop it from doing whatever it's doing. And you can document the relationships between the components with the AI assistants as well. And really, what this does is it shifts you towards more systems level thinking, while the AI can handle implementation details. Now, this would be the ideal future. I don't think that this future is here yet, but I think we are progressing towards that. And the last of this is test, comprehensive verification. I cannot emphasize how important this step is. This isn't just running your unit tests and calling it a day, right? This is integration testing, platform integration testing, especially across the generated components. This is manual smoke tests of the UI and user flows. You test with real-world data and edge cases, and you monitor the initial deployment. If you are deploying code that is AI generated, you need to monitor that deployment closely. And so you can trust it. I would say, I don't even know if I like this phrase, trust but verify. I would say, if I were to rewrite the slide, which I would do, I would say don't trust the AI code. Never trust the code that the AI puts out. Verify it always. Pretend like it's a junior engineer who's just writing the worst code. Always scrutinize every aspect of it. So obviously, there's a few cautions with this. You need to have, as I mentioned, you need to have a pair programming mindset. AI is like a junior partner. It's fast, but it does need guidance. And obviously, there's other security concerns, right? Hard-coded credentials, I have seen that happen. Outdated libraries, these can all lead to security vulnerabilities, right? Now, luckily, the tooling today is fantastic, and I'm sure all of you have seen this. For those of us who've been working for 20 plus years in the industry, which I've only been working 20 years, the tooling change from 20 years ago to today is miles ahead. Now we can have GitHub code scans or GitLab code scans that are looking for security vulnerabilities. Leverage those, right? Use things like static analysis tools, and I'm forgetting the exact one off the top of my head right now, but static analysis tools that can run against, as a part of your testing as you're in your integration pipeline, right? So if you don't have CI/CD, set up CI/CD. This is continuous integration, continuous delivery. It is easy to do, and I will tell you that AI is extremely good at generating GitHub actions. It's so easy to do that you can do it in a few seconds. In fact, I've even set up code reviews using Gemini, right, where Gemini will just automatically review the code. Now, it's a bit verbose. It tends to nitpick quite a bit, but you can imagine you can tune that. So there's a lot of ways to use these tools that isn't even just generating code itself. But I will say, these are speaking explicitly about cautions. You need to be really careful here. Additionally, this is something that has concerned me, right, is this idea of like over-reliance. So I've mentioned some of the bad things. I've mentioned some of the good things. And now I'm going to get into a gray area with it. And that is skill atrophy, right? There's a risk for developers who are relying on these things. And it gets into why I mentioned reviewing and comprehending that AI generated code. Don't just copy and paste, right? Like there were days where you'd have a group of developers who would just copy and paste things from Stack Overflow, right? Now we're in a whole new era of copying and pasting from Stack Overflow. We're in the era where AI is effectively generating that copy paste garbage, which a lot of times it is. But to get back to my point about this over-reliance, anecdotally, I have worked at, I work for Actual Reality Technologies, which is a startup here in town. And, I have a few, engineers who are just graduated, and I have a few interns. And anecdotally, I have noticed that over-reliance on these tools by my developers has definitely generated a ton of tech debt. It's introduced really subtle bugs. And this gets into like why I always say verify, always verify, right? Like this is a process. You have to continue. You have to really scrutinize this code. And you can almost ask yourself, is it even worth it at some point? I do think it is, but I think that you have to do that with caution. And I think if you have junior developers you are augmenting with AI, the key here is if you have the tools and the processes in your organization, you can prevent bugs and security risks from being added through some of the things I mentioned, CI/CD pipelines, with GitHub Actions or whatever your tool of choice, whatever your CI/CD, Travis, etc. Set up the tooling to make it easy for yourself, right? Like in your team. The more you do this, the faster you're going to be able to work, and you're going to be able to rely on these engineers. So I will say that it does get into in the code review phase. You really, really, really want to be particular. I would say I think my engineers would probably agree that I'm pretty nitpicky on pull requests. And so critical code deserves human review, especially edge cases, and we need to test those AI-generated solutions against comprehensive test suites. And I think I went a little too fast for my talk, but that's all right. Some practical considerations, right? So some things to consider are data privacy. So for example, if you work at Mercy or ProMedica, HIPAA, and now there is a data agreement you can have with OpenAI. I work for a healthcare startup, and you can get a data privacy agreement, but if you don't know, don't insert random data into ChatGPT, right? You could be a HIPAA violation, right? Or if you're working for another large org, there could be privacy considerations. So a useful way to mitigate this is to use something like Ollama and a local model. Ollama, if you haven't tried Ollama, it's fantastic. If you have an older computer, well, that probably won't work. But Ollama with Mistral or Llama 3.2 7B, fantastic models to work with locally, pretty quick, and you can use it comparably to the tools I mentioned. And the other bit of this is choosing the right model for the right job. Claude Sonnet 3.7 has been fantastic to work with. Some of the code it's generated it's the best I've seen so far from, at least in my experience. It's the best AI generated code I've seen. So, Claude Sonnet 3.5, 3.7 for coding or creativity. That's Anthropic's, which that guy's been involved in that space for a while. And the other bit is a thinking model for reasoning. And that would be like O1, O3. DeepSeek's fantastic as well, unless you have China data privacy considerations. Probably don't want to use that. But it is a fantastic tool. I've used it as well. And if you haven't tried Cursor yet, I highly recommend it. It is, I made the switch from IntelliJ over to Cursor to give it a shot, and I've been working with it for the last 4 months, and I'm pretty happy with it. And it's just VS Code with a wrapper, and the new versions of it is pretty fantastic as long as you set up your project files, etc. Which that's another talk that we can have, and specifically about how to use Cursor. But I do recommend it. And I'm going to open this up to questions, thoughts or questions. Yeah.
So James Malcolm, by the way, as a developer. So one of the things that I run into in the corporate setting is that I have to develop against deadlines. And I guess this would probably fall to your cautionary slide, where it's like, yeah, the tool is fantastic, but I guess I'm interested in people's experience, maybe your personal experience or others, when you realize you have to pull the plug because the AI is not getting you there, and you could get there, but you just do it yourself because you've got a livable model, or you've got a critical bug that you're trying to fix, and you're praying that the AI will fix it for you, but then after like 3 or 4 attempts, you're like, screw it, I need to just do this myself. Does anybody have experience with that, or do you have experience with that?
I would say that I have experience with that. I know Sarab over here who works with me does. I know Alden who's sitting back there does. We've all had an experience like that. And it came to a point where, yes, at some point I just sat down and wrote the code myself, or I would take a step back. And this is the point where I would actually tell the LLM, take a step back from the problem. Let's evaluate it using like Sonnet 3.5 or 3.7, or the 3.7 has a reasoning mode, and iterate it. That actually has gotten me unstuck a majority of the time, where I didn't actually have to intervene manually.
I've seen one developer that was making a problem, but basically he got to the point where he was dependent on the AI and had a feature due and just couldn't deliver because he couldn't get the AI to reason his way through it. And at the end of the day, it was some weird swirly bug somewhere, some nested code file, and he generated volumes of code, didn't understand it, so he couldn't sift through it and find it and fix it. It took us like a week to actually bring it out by hand.
Yeah, I believe that, and that's resonates because that's a problem we've had. One of my developers, Thomas, has had similar issues where we realized that, eventually he realized that he actually didn't understand the underlying code. And that's a bit of the problem, right? That's where I was getting at with this like skill atrophy problem that concerns me, in the university system. And this is a part of why I came up with this. This is a part of why we use this. We try and use portions of this this framework to reason through things just to avoid those scenarios, because we've had those exact same scenarios.
Have you found the doing of just asking AI to kind of look through your code base and maybe just document like here's how the structure, I wonder if that might be another thing to understand the application architecture.
It is, yeah. That's a bit when I say take a step back. It tends to do that similar thing where I'll have it evaluate and look through the whole what's the whole overlying architecture here, underlying architecture, and then from there I can use that as context to then iterate. So yes. Any other questions? Yes.
So I don't really have industry experience with development, but I've got a lot of personal projects. And the way I use AI is more to like learn syntax rather than solve my problems for me. And I've heard about Cursor. I remember there was like Loft in the chat figured out that way. I've heard about Cursor. Is that able to like handle a full project and understand?
I'm glad you said that, because I actually wanted to say this to your point earlier. Was my solution to this is typically Cursor. It actually has a code base chat where you can just literally say @codebase. And so what Cursor does underneath the scenes is it's basically RAG. It's generating embeddings for all the files in your code. It's doing like a top KN search, finding the relevant chunks, and effectively trying to fit that into whatever context window for your whatever model you're using. But Cursor's code base chat is your best friend in that regard. Yeah, it is very fantastic. And with project rules, you can effectively say, like, I can say, given this regular expression of files, maybe all my TS files, if I'm working with TypeScript, or my PY files, et cetera, I can define specific rules that target those files, effectively just giving it a system prompt to say, like, for this bit of code, do these principles. Or you can have general prompts that you can apply all across, or even targeted ones, right, where you can at the specific in the prompt window, you can just type @ and have it pick a particular project rule that you established, maybe for a particular use case, right? So I know, for example, we use Material UI when we're developing our front ends. So I have it specifically, I have a project rule, right? Because when it starts generating UI code, it starts adding all this custom styling, which totally violates the whole point of having a design system, right? The design system is supposed to lay everything out so that there's equal spacing. But AI generated code just is like, I'm just going to do whatever I want, and I got no rules. I'm going to do whatever I want. So I tend to just use a prompt that says, here's the docs. Use the design system. Don't use this SX attribute, which lets them custom style. And by doing that, you tend to get a better output. So Rob.
I'm not an industry plan I was gonna say, like you mentioned earlier, that like most productivity stems from very rigid systems. Right? How can I leverage like one of these LLMs or like AI to help me develop those systems, because I'm still a project, have no real experience with these systems on it. Right? How can I use AI to work on like the DX side of things, and the developer experience, and like, making systems aspect of things, so just writing code.
So Claude, Anthropic has something called MCP, which is Model Context Protocol, which is, we can have a whole nother conversation about my opinions on that, which it's interesting, and I think it's neat that there are other solutions for the exact same problem. But things like MCP could be really useful. I had thought about demoing some of that, but I think that'll be a future thing where I demo what you can do with MCP in terms of having it generate commit messages for you using something like a particular process, whether that's like, I'm trying to think of the commit message rule. I forget, there's like a format you can use for commit messages that you can, things like that could be really helpful. But realistically, I think I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Josh. What Josh said earlier about using it to teach syntax, I would also say do the same thing, but with systems, right? Like maybe let's talk about how DNS works, right? Like that's a fascinating system. Distributed system, really, really interesting. That's another tool. And I think Josh is spot on in that if you really want to get, and I know you mentioned developer experience, but I think if you're going to grow as a developer, by not having it give you the answer and having it maybe goad you towards the right answer, or really, even for syntax, is great. Did that sufficiently answer your question? Probably not. Ish. Jeremy.
Have you put any thought into like how LLMs kind of perpetuate what like the current technology is? Because kind of at the core, like the LLMs are trained on the internet, right? And so say something like React, which has just a ton of like ecosphere and like data available. The LLM is probably more quick to suggest a React solution than say any small framework that might be like a better fit like for a project.
Yeah, that's a great point. My personal, that's a very good point. And it's something that I've noticed as I've learned more about fine tuning. That given your sufficient data set, it tends to skew things. And so because there is a lot of React projects out there, much to I'm sure some of our chagrin, right? Like there's a lot of other frameworks out there, and I'm guilty of this because we use Next.js, React, MUI, and I do that because I can teach my developers it, and it's super easy. And if we use that same thing for every project, it's easy. But that's not my ideal workflow, right? I'd prefer to choose the frameworks and tools for the job. And so, yeah, that is a problem, especially if you're working with something obscure. I'm sure that you've had problem having it help with your custom web framework that you made. But even things like Svelte, right? Like it
Yeah, I mean, it does a pretty good job, mostly because of leverage and kind of vanilla technologies. But I guess the thought I have is that it might squash some progress, that might be made, because someone went in to solve the problem, kind of on their own instead of asking the LLM, to kind of do it for them, and then again, just that data out there of like the current time being so pervasive.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the data to say, but anecdotally, yeah, I'm sure that will impact it. But on the flip side of that, and to play devil's advocate, I also think that the LM sometimes come up with pretty interesting solutions. If you prompt it right, you can definitely get some creative solutions that you might not have thought of previously. So I think there's both sides of that. Yes.
I have a different thing, but I find that for the niche things, if you let whatever your AI choices open up to web searches, that helps with the niche stuff a lot more modern stuff.
That's a great point.
It still turns out some garbage because a lot of that modern stuff, like random blog posts, is garbage. Proceed with caution. But one of my things that I wanted to ask was, what about code adjacent things? Like, I know every developer loves documentation. I actually personally do enjoy making like process diagrams of like, here's my UX flow for my application, here's my tech architecture diagram that helps communicate to others on my team or maybe my stakeholders. Sequence diagram.
Yeah.
Like
UML.
On home page, user goes here, here, here. If you're in a certain goal, you go there. That type of stuff is very helpful for stakeholder communication.
Yep.
I've been experimenting with taking my user stories and pumping that into an LLM and having that churn out mermaid code to then turn that into a process diagram all automatically. So
Yep.
I don't have to do any of that crap by hand.
That's a great point.
That.
I have, yeah. That it's a fantastic way to do things, and it can pump out Mermaid, and Claude can now generate SVGs, which is pretty. Actually, this graph I iterated with Claude, right? Claude generated that SVG. which is pretty crazy. But yes, I think that's a great point. And I see your hand back there. I'll get you in a second. You know, I think it's a great point in iterating, and that's a part of when I say like iterating with with having your acting it as a PM, the D of the the acronym. That's a part of what I'm getting at is like iterate with it, have it pump out system, activity diagrams and any sort of UML you need to take to stakeholders, in particular with your team, because then you guys can review it, maybe have an RFC or like a request for comments document that you work on together, some kind of game plan document that can be iterated upon. Yes, in the back.
So first, I want to come on the presentation and say thank you, because this is probably the single most responsible talk that I've seen on integrating AI into the workflow. And you're talking about things like don't attribute your skills, verify everything, don't just copy paste, and especially the data privacy. There's been a lot of emerging both academic and professional research about data concerns, being able to regurgitate personally identifying information from LLMs, as well as just data privacy things when it comes to these models coming from OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, things like that. So thank you for being incredibly responsible.
Oh, thank you.
And this leads me to my question, because I am both a professor and a PhD candidate in computer science, and a lot of my research goes into the design and implementation of LLMs. But I'm also an incredible AI skeptic, because I know how they work under the scenes. They're just stochastic models that do statistical analysis and multi-dimensional vector space. That's it. They know nothing about context, nothing about syntax flow. So I personally don't touch them with technical goals, mostly because of the ethical concerns. So what would you say to someone like me, who is a deep skeptic about integrating these systems into my software development workflow and other workflows that I have, to try and tease me out of the Bronze Age into this Enlightened Age? I don't remember the exact term, I can see it back here. Would you say to someone like me who's in that space where it's like, I'm not convinced, but you made it sound enticing because you were responsible about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting small is the answer. Having it do things like evaluating a code base, generate some system diagrams is a really good start. If you're a skeptic in the code generation side of it, have it, and I'll be honest and admit that I mostly use it as a fancy autocomplete 75% of it, like 75% of the time. And I've only recently started delving into the code generation side of it, but really only for certain things, and that's for pet projects. So I mean, maybe just start with a pet project, something small and simple, and see if it surprises you. In particular, Sonnet 3.7 may surprise you with what it can do. I've had it generate things one shot that were pretty decent, and if you give it enough context, in particular with what it may surprise you. Greg.
So I just sat through a 4-hour workshop in Cursor by some really high-end people, and one of the outcomes, or one of the talking points that came out was for teams that are working in really newer technologies, say Tailwind just came out with a version 4. These sort of apps, they will downgrade you to Tailwind 3, and you actually kind of have to fight it, and give it very strong imperative rules to say, and you have to actually write your rule in 2 ways, really maybe a strong way and more of a flexible way, in order to ensure that you can lock into the technology that you want to work with and not have to fight it while it's trying to on its own downgrade you to another thing. And then the second point I wanted to make was a lot of AI is not free. In the Cursor, you can choose different AI libraries that you can pull in, but some people might be surprised to learn that you'll get billed extra for the amount of code, I don't know what it goes by.
You have to enable that.
Or whatever it is.
Tokens, yeah.
Correct, yeah, so, I mean, it's something, you kind of have to like realize that, you know, like, once you like pay the fee, there's still maybe additional fees that you incur that you're not really realizing, because Cursor doesn't tell you.
Well, it does. So I'll tell you, as a Cursor user, that's not by default. So you can pay for additional fast executions, and so like you can enable that if you want. The most I've been billed is like $2 for that. But that's they do that, and they don't do it by tokens. They do it by number of requests. So you get 500 fast requests with their premium models, which are the Sonnet 3.7s, et cetera. Alden, I know you had a question back there, and then I'll get back to you. Oh, do I? Oh, shoot. I can't even see yeah, I might have it up on StreamYard here. Oh, I have comments. I haven't even been seeing these. Hello, Alex. You asked this like 20 minutes ago. Oh, gosh, there's somebody else who came in. Oh, that's on Twitch. So he said, Alex Brown said, as a junior dev, how do we trust the code being generated? How can we know if the code is good or not if we have no experience with the code it's generating? That's a very good question, Alex. Unfortunately, really, the reality is that only experience can tell you that. I could tell you that you could talk back and forth with the LLM, but that's a feedback loop, right? And not a good one. So the reality is, and I'll tell you this is the best advice I ever got in this field, is if you do not have a side project, you are stagnating, right? You need to continuously be learning. This is like a continuous field. So you will learn over time. Hello. Okay, I see I got a couple online here. These are, so we are, I might not have said this, but we're live streaming this to BGSU as well. Where hopefully the next iteration will be live streaming to UT and some of the other local universities as well. So thank you for the question online. I hope that was sufficiently answered. And thank you, Jaden, as well. And you had a question, I believe.
I just wanted to say, I really appreciate you putting this talk on and for organizing. That was super cool. So super appreciative. Thank you so much. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you. So I know we're pretty close to time now, but is there any other questions? I'm happy to keep going on this. Yes.
One thing that the rest of the question online, I've found success. You don't trust what the AI generates. Piece that's answering with different AI and see what it thinks, because sometimes you get a different opinion. One of the other things that's sprung up for me as I started using GitHub Copilot edits is I find that a lot of times when I prompt it, my brain then forgets basically all the context because I'm waiting for it to figure out, interpret what I want, do its reasoning, go make the code changes, etc. Sometimes that takes a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I just check out at that point. That's like my check email time, check IMs, but I lose that context. I think a lot of programmers enjoy having that mental context. You get that flow. I lose that every time I do that. Have you experienced that with Cursor or any of the other like more automated agent mode AI tools?
So yes, in fact, sometimes, much to my partner's chagrin, we'll watch a movie and I'll be iterating. I'll have Cursor up next to me, just continuously iterating on it. So yes, and I do feel like you lose a little bit of that flow, and so I don't really know what the right answer is right now. To be honest, I don't know. I think it's still one of the problems with this is how do we maintain that flow state as we're navigating, between these things. I don't know what the answer to that is. It's a good question though. Cool. I don't know if we have any more questions online. Any other questions here?
As an aside to your podcast, my younger sister is in the early 70s, and I like saying through the touchpad already.
That's wild. That used to be a job. I mean, even computer used to be a job. Just punch holes in it. What a meticulous. Imagine spilling all those and having to find the right order. And so I'm going to leave on this point, which is tomorrow's 10x developers aren't coding faster. They're augmenting their creativity with AI. And with that, I'll wrap up the first Toledo Codes talk. I really appreciate everyone here. A big shout out to Toledo Tech Loft, Chris Eischen, for hosting us. And another big shout out to Keith Instone. Keith Instone is a pillar of the tech community here in Toledo. For everything you do, thank you, Keith. And I really appreciate, and thank you to everyone for coming out today. I'm really excited about this. I hope that I'm not the only one who comes up here on stage. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. The website is up. I have a website up, Toledo.Codes. There is a talk submission form there. Feel free to submit a talk at any time. Next month, we won't be doing tech talks, but instead, we're going to be doing a demo day. So if you have a project you want to show off, something cool, I'm going to set up, I forgot to set up the form before this, but I'll set it up. And then we'll have folks scheduled to start getting some demos. But the idea here is to do this every third Thursday of the month at the Loft at 6 p.m. Pretty straightforward stuff. Hopefully we don't have Jerry Seinfeld next time in town blocking up all the parking spaces. So I appreciate all of you who made it out, who trekked to be here. And I'm really excited about what the future of tech in Toledo is, right? This is amazing. So thank you for the great turnout, and hope to see you guys here again. Two things real quick. I have the next meetup right here on Luma. That's the platform I'm using if you guys want to register for that. I'd love to get you guys to the next Toledo Codes event. I'll leave this up. And then I have one other ask for you before I let you go. The next ask is, I have another QR code here, which is a survey that I've been putting out. This is at toledo.codes/survey. I'm really trying to evaluate the entire tech ecosystem in Toledo. This isn't just to help inform this event. This is to inform, this is so I can take this to, our community survey serves as like compelling evidence to the city, to the county and state officials that Toledo residents actively desire and support technology advancement. And then with this data, we can demonstrate grassroots demand for tech investment in our region, right? And by doing that, I'm going to continuously have conversations with folks like RGP, et cetera, so we can get funding, we can have more of these kinds of events, and we can build tech ecosystem in Toledo. So thank you again.
We are accepting membership. So if this is something that you're interested, you like being a part of this community of tech people, we do a lot of other tech-related events here. We have all kinds of people co-working out of the space. So we'd love to bring you into the space and make you really a part of the community on a regular basis. So if you're interested in co-working, we'd love to have you. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you. I meant to put that in my slide too.
I'm good on the fly like that.